First of all, let's talk about the Bank of Japan, this sort of effort to get out of a deflationary spiral that the Japanese economy has been in. Are they doing good work?
Yeah, I think the world of Abenomics looks more credible than much of the last 25 years in Japan. Stimulus matters. Obviously, monetary and fiscal stimulus matters. Of course, Japan has got big regional considerations. How do the economics with China interact with the political and military with China? I think a very big deal. But I think the big story at the end of the day in Japan is a broader sense of opening. The demography is destiny. Japan's population is shrinking because it's an aging society, and Japan hasn't been as open or attractive to migrants. So, yeah, Abenomics matters, but I don't think it on its own can transform the trajectory of the Japanese economy.
Well, we've been talking about the 3 arrows for a long time and wondering when that third arrow will fire. But as you say, these policies are very domestically unpopular. Do they need to be done, though?
Well, yes. I mean, I think what Prime Minister Abe is doing, interesting kind of move to play up Japanese nationalism. Some people would say it's a distraction from the economic issues, but I think you could also view it as a rallying cry to sort of try to change the trajectory of the country. I mean, think about a symbolic issue like an independent Japanese military. That's actually a way to stimulate the economy. Who knows what it does for the big geopolitics with the US and China. So I think we should view it pretty broadly. Obviously, the markets have been focused on Abenomics, but I think there's a lot more potentially to go on in Japan.
Yeah. In terms of the themes that we're looking at, political, military, economic, it's all very much intertwined.
All intertwined.
We've been talking a lot about the prospect of a trade war it's been hanging over global markets over the past few days. Is that a real threat in 2018?
Maybe I'm naive, but I'm an optimist on this. I really think two things. First, what we see with a lot of stuff out of President Trump is you see this big flare explodes, but then it comes down, and what ends after the flare is much smaller policy change. The second thing I'd say is that I think things like free trade agreements, trade balances and imbalances actually aren't the core of the modern global economy. It's all about multinational firms, interlocking investment relationships. So I would expect, I think it's not surprising that some of the air is coming out of the tariff trade war balloon today. I'd like to see a pivot actually to much more focus on investment, maybe between the US and China, bilateral reciprocal investment liberalization. I think that potentially is more important for the global economy and actually an upside opportunity, not a downside risk.
And I should point out that President Trump is Wharton alumni. There has been victims to globalization. How do you rectify that?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it in terms of adverse impact on less skilled workers, I actually think technology, you're looking at your iPad right now, we tend not to blame technology for dislocation, but I think that it's been more technology than globalization. No surprise, though, that we tend to think about trade because it's easier to put a face to it, or immigration. You think about the pushback in the last couple of years against both trade and immigration. The big story has been technology. Yes, high-skilled people have won from technology and globalization. Lower-skilled people, not so much. I think it's a real responsibility, both of government and the corporate sector, to try to make growth more inclusive. I'm in education, so I think more skills are always going to be better. That's a big part of the story. But it's understandable to me that a lot of people, they look back on what they think was a simpler and better age. I don't think you can turn off globalization. I don't think you can turn off technology. So what we need to do is empower people to take advantage of these two big drivers of global change.
The other major news, of course, this morning is this kind of continued rapprochement theme between North Korea, South Korea and the United States, with this, reports of a potential meeting taking place between the two leaders. Is this a turning point, do you think, given that this has also hung over regional economies and markets for so long?
Well, of course, it's hung over the region and the regional economy for a very long time. So I have a very simple bottom line on the Korean Peninsula, which is the status quo is probably about the best we can do. The problem is managing the status quo has proved really difficult as North Korea's military nuclear aspirations have increased in the intensity of their activity. So what I think we've seen in the last few months, not only out of the US, but from North Korean side, maybe independently from North Korea, is just, again, taking a little air out of the balloon to go back to a status quo position, which of course looks a little fragile, unstable, North Korea, South Korea, Korean Peninsula, nuclear North Korea. But I think the status quo is in everyone's interest, actually. It's the best we can do. So I certainly welcome the news from today.